My name is Pavan Davra, and welcome to Precious Brain Lab, where we talk on brain disorders, brain connectivity, and brain development. In today's episode, we're going to understand the part of autism. Although we don't have the cure for autism, we all know that. But yet, what are we supposed to learn in depth about autism? And if we learn things about autism, then it becomes easier to communicate with the patient. The point of today's episode we'll be focusing on is the part of how does autism occur and what are the ways of understanding autism. We're going to discuss all of this in today's episode. And plus, we're going to understand what are the ways of understanding autism, including the diet and what are we supposed to do in terms of contributing towards this disease. So, in the early 1943, if we go way back in time, that we'll try to understand what autism is, that'll become much more easier for us to understand what are the traits of autism. So where did all this begin? Leo Kanner first described the behavior syndrome known as autism in 1943. So we have to go back in time in 1943. This was the first time they discovered about autism, which means autism is something that was absolutely like a behavioral syndrome. I mean, imagine we call it autism, and they began the study of knowing that it is a behavior syndrome. And then what happened was, he further on went and said, he concluded that this was a neurodevelopment disorder and that these children have come into the world with an innate inability to form the usual biological provided contact with people. So that was the first evidence that came up in terms of understanding autism. But this gives an insight that, yes, the social contacting is pretty much difficult, and yet it is the same till now, isn't it? A lot of autism children are still having the same problem, which means that was the beginning of the finding was social contact. And yes, we all agree to this. It's very difficult for the autism child to have something in their mind and then they will just speak out straight to the people around them. It's never easy. It's a difficult task for them. So as we get along further, that the social contacting is really, really difficult for autism. Then what happened later after that? Right after Leo Kanner, then more findings were up onto the surface as the neuroscience grew in terms of finding more answers to this unusual disease. But then that more finding gave us answers like it was called as autism, is now defined as autism by range of social and communicative deficit severities coupled with repetitive and unusual sensory motor behaviors. I agree to this condition that it is more of the sensory pathways, that most of the people, they find it really difficult to stay normal, to stay calm. And also we're going to speak on the part of sensory overload. So we're going to understand everything inside this inside functions of autism. If we have come to this point where now, earlier it was all about biological provided contact with people. That's it. And then further on, it was repetitive and unusual sensory motor behaviors. Look where we're advancing then. From 1943 till some years ahead. Then this was that finding. Then what happened was, in particular, it is a disorder of connectivity which appears from current evidence to primarily involve intrahemispheric connectivity. Finish. Now that we've come to this point, now look how deep they went. First they said it was contact with people, then neuroscience grew. Neuroscience grew pretty good, and then they came up with unusual sensory motor behaviors. And then what happens? Involvement of intrahemispheric connectivity. How deep this goes from here. Imagine, just by social contacting, and now we've gone way too far. This is how the neuroscience advanced as they try to understand autism. It is, although a complex problem. People try to say, like, you experiment with the rats and you experiment with a lot of things, and why can't you have findings for autism? It's never easy. In this video, you'll understand why is it difficult to get a solution for autism. You'll seriously understand everything today. Then what happened was, after some years, they started to observe children. And then what happened? Patterns of onset of ASD have been examined, particularly in children who exhibit a loss of language and or social skills in first few years of life. In the first few years of life, we've observed that there was a language and social skills. The loss of language and social skills. Now, how advanced it went then after that? It just keeps advancing. You see this, you catch one string and then you just extend it, you keep extending it. These are the contribution of neuroscience. Past researchers passed on their knowledge to the future ones, and then those future ones took it further, and then they were advancing each era about understanding autism. So which means we're still ahead, that we're trying to understand the inside function. So now that we've come here to this part, then we'll understand what exactly is autism in modern age. What exactly it is from here on. It's going to be really, really deep and insightful. So as you can see, the autism means limited engagement in social chat, sensory motor impairments, difficulty in reciprocal conversation, and limited gestures. That's it. You see, if I say that's it about this, it doesn't mean that these are the outer things that you see. That's the autism. No, autism means the inside function is wrecked. Now that's the difficulty. That's the challenge. That's the most important challenge. Now, if you see sensory motor impairments, difficulty in reciprocal conversations, limited engagement in social chat, and limited gestures, these are all the inside functions. Please try to understand. This is never easy. If an autism child has these kind of symptoms, then it is coming from the inside functionality, which is also related to the genetics and our CNS, which means central nervous system. Central nervous system is vast, complex, and never easy to cure somebody that comes from a place of genetic deficits or you could say like the development of the child didn't grow well. I'm sorry for the rains. It's really raining really hard today. Please adjust. So that we've come to this point, then what happened was there were a few of the scientists who researched in 1970, 1964, and 1978. What they did was, in fact, researchers have found association between autism and seizures, intellectual disability, language and cognitive deficits arising from attention difficulties, sensory and vestibular system. Now, Harmelin and O'Connor and Rimland, Rutter and Skorpler, in addition to Reuters and Floston. These are the scientists who gave a tremendous contribution towards autism. Now imagine what they've done. They went deep and they tried to understand what exactly is happening inside. So the first thing we understand is sensory and vestibular system and attentional difficulties. Now, sensory and vestibular systems research is very deep and vast. It's never easy because then you have to go with the other components, which was not fully exhibiting on those days, but they had limited access to certain information, certain machines that they used, and they were able to find something from it. Now, in regards to all of this, that we try to understand that there is a sensitivity and vestibular systems were imbalanced and they were wrecked. And especially when you see the autism, the attention difficulties, when you say to a child, like, pay attention, I'm talking to you, a newborn baby, and then you say, oh, it's a newborn baby, it's okay. When they grow, they'll pay attention to me. So as they grow, the symptoms get worse. They won't even pay attention at all. And this becomes a red flag. So what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to have a chat with a doctor, the child specialist, so we can do certain tests, and that test gives us a great evaluation that, yes, your child has ADHD or autism. It'll be clear on that surface, but it's more towards the aggressiveness of this disease that it really turns you off from inside, which means your system does not grow. Now that's pretty much difficult in children's. Children means growth. If that growth is stopped, then manually from outside, we have to put a tremendous effort to allow that brain to get to a certain level, which means what the system was supposed to do automatically, the child is facing really difficulty to do those things automatically, which means not by default. Now you have to take help of others to make it work. That's a very difficult challenge because, like I said, when we talk on sensory and vestibular system, we're talking difficulty in motor functions, which means hands, legs, the movement of heads, the eye movement, the listening part, the tongue, the smell. All of this gets very difficult. It's very hard for the child to stay focused and afloat. It's very difficult because these systems are wrecked from inside. And that is why there's the biggest challenge is the genetics are changing. But that change is because there's a deficit. Please try to understand. There's a certain deficit found and the growth is stopped. I'll give an example. Let's say there was a couple of trees. That tree gave us something. That tree gave some seed, Like the fruit grew, it gave us a seed, and then with that seed, we grow that tree again. So let's say one tree is fully grown. Then there's another one. It's growing. excuse me, the challenge is that that tree that grows is going to be similar as the one that is fully grown. But that's not happening here. The tree will grow with its own pace. The tree will have its own size. It won't be as similar to the other one. It'll be a different size. The trunk shape will be different. The branches will be different. And the growth of that tree will be different from the others. Excuse me. Why did I have to talk on this is because we're the part of the nature. If the nature have differences in trees, then imagine if the parents did not have any autism, but the child has autism. It doesn't mean that why did the child have autism? It means there was some defect during pregnancy, and that's why the child has grown autistic. As simple as that. Now, I'm not blaming any mothers. I'm blaming the part of we don't understand how to, have a healthy child. Like, how to get pregnant. What are we supposed to do during pregnancy? We don't have much information. And what are the effects of the surroundings, of the environment, food, drinks, sleeping habits, gadgets. There's so many things, and we need to learn. And because of these deficits, that we don't have much information, the child is grown autistic. Now, when it's grown autistic, what are the deficits you're going to find? The first thing we're going to find is the deficit is in the genetics. As they grow, the first thing on the surface is unusual attention. The attention behavior is unusual. And you would think like, he's a younger child. It's okay. As they grow, it gets worse. Why it gets worse? I'll give an example. Let's say, I'll give an example like this. Let's say the inside part, let's say the human beings have genetics. So imagine this is like a genetic stuff, I'm just giving an example. So what I'm going to do is, there's a strings of genetics, strings of genes, All right? Now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go ahead and fold this. Imagine this is knockoff. The genes is knocked off. I fold it to just give an example. As the child grows, this section of the genes that is supposed to give certain development to the child, let's say the brain growth, let's say the attention. So what happens? This is knocked off. Do the child will have attention? No. It'll be very difficult to pay attention. Why? Because the genes are knocked off. How can they pay attention? That growth is stopped. So the growth is stopped. The automatic system is gone. Imagine you buy a washing machine. There's manual, semi-automatic, and there's automatic. So the automatic machine is switched off. Now we have to train manually to improve the condition. That's the difference I'm talking about. Imagine that the emotional processing and another genes is knocked off. Boom, 2 genes are gone. If 2 genes are knocked off, then what happens? There'll be multiplication, duplication. There'll be, minusing out certain genes, or there'll be multiplication of certain genes. And when they start to knock off and they have these duplications and increasing of those genes, then what happens is the brain gets confused. The growth factor is completely wrecked. This time, either they'll be having difficulties in hearing, difficulties in seeing things, difficulty in talking, difficulty in understanding things, because there are multiplication, duplications, and there is this, extensions of various genes. And if that happens, and if there are certain genes are knocked off as well, then imagine these are the extensions. Then they start to extend. I'm giving an example. I'm just, showing you like this. So when it starts to extend, you see, it's all confusing now, because Earlier, it was nice and systematic like this. Simple and straight, systematic. Now that it has extended multiplication and everything happened. So what happened? Now the genes are complicated. This is where it's very difficult to treat autism, because now we got to look inside and understand what is happening to the genetics. It's very difficult. And if that is happening, then how does a child is going to be treated? It will take time. And that is why, as these multiplication that happens, the child will behave in abnormal conditions, abnormal emotional processing, sensory overload. Then there is also the part of eyes, attention, that they cannot look straight to the person. They'll be like, doing something like this. So what are we doing? We're giving them this manual treatment to let the child look straight. You give them that therapy where the child looks straight in the eyes of the person. And if you cannot look in the eyes, then they train them, okay, look up in their nose, their cheeks, the forehead, but look at the different sections of the face. This is a training. What I'm talking about is a manual, which means the genes are knocked off. It's automated, automation is gone. Now you got to do it manually. That is how autism works for now. When we find the cure, then we don't have to do any of this. Possibly that I believe in future, it's going to be more treated towards the genetics, where these genetico-pharmacology or the genetic medications are going to really alter the conditions of autism. And I hope that we may find such medications. So now that we're here, now let us try and understand even deeper more about autism. What do we need to understand? So as you can see, autism is a polygenetic development neurobiological disorder with multi-organ system involvement, though it predominantly involves central nervous system dysfunction. Now we're talking. This is not normal. Please try to understand. What am I saying here? Central nervous system is like vast as universe. Vast as universe. That's better. How can you say that? We don't know the possibilities of universe, right? Let's imagine that the universe have many layers. If we come to this point of universe, then when we extend, we see more universe. So universe is far and deep. This is how central nervous system is. It is so deep, it's layered, layers. One scientist cannot solve this. Or let's say we need several people come together from the world, and they come with all those small information, then we combine it to understand the behavior through the nervous system. This is how complex nervous system is. And I'm going to be very honest, that nervous system is never easy to be treated. It is flexible, it's absolutely changing. It's got that folding plasticity that it just keeps changing. And it can mold in anything. Imagine that, I take this wire. So how do you do that? Like I just fold and mold and do whatever I want with the wire. How flexible it is, and how can you find things on stuff like this? It is slow, flexible, and it just keeps changing. And that's the headache, because we're talking about CNS. And that's the challenge that is found in autism. The CNS just keeps changing, and that is how the child behavior also changes. If I were to talk on abnormalities of autism, then during the child's birth, what do you see? Abnormal size of the frontal or the cortical regions, or the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe. The side of the hearing sections and the front sections, abnormal enlargement. But as a child grows, as they get adult, you don't find that enlargement anymore. How extensively and interestingly autism is changing. Look at that. In the child, abnormal in the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe. As they grow, that thing, it disappears. And there are many cases where the scientists have researched on certain ways that even though they've not found anything, there's still disability found in people in autism as they grow as an adult. So it's a very difficult and challenging part of it. The next that we understand is, this is very interesting, autism is associated with intellectual disability, up to 40% of the cases, speech and language delayed, up to 25 of cases, and various cognitive impairments including executive function disabilities, organization and planning, and theory of the mind deficits. This was found by Simonov in 2008. What is happening here? My goodness, I told you this is not normal. Now, if you see how flexible CNS is, you will see that 40% intellectual disability. Why there's so much of differentiation if it's an autism? Now you understand what I want to make you learn. CNS is very, very, very extensive, and it can fold and mold into anything. Imagine the snake. How does the snake fold? It can mold anything, it can roll anything. It can, shrink, it can extend, it can bite, it can fold. That is how flexible is our CNS. And it's a headache, but we're still trying to get more answers. You see how various ways it is changing. And how did we find this was through copy number variant. It's a type of test that we understand the power of genetics and the number of cells. So then what happened was that we've come to this point that intellectual disability is really found in autism. We all know how bad it is. We have to do it manually. Imagine an autism child. You have to do certain tasks every day. You have to repeat tasks every day. They keep forgetting things. We're going to get to that point of that why. So the parents have to repeat it over and over again. Not only the parents have to if they work, they have to go to work, then they got to take care of that child. It's very difficult. I have, I feel for parents who take care of autism child. I feel for them because it's very difficult and it's challenging. And sometimes the parents get frustrated, they get really stressed out. Even they need break from their regular life, because if they work, then they have to take care of the child. And in doing all of this, they also need to take care of themselves, which they get very less amount of time to take care of themselves. It's very difficult for them to manage. But hats off to the parents who are really taking care of their autistic child. Hats off to them. I salute them in this video. I pay a lot of respect to taking care of autistic child. Really, really. But then, what the next thing that we need to understand is, later during that research, they found that a number of specific genetic syndromes, such as Fragile X syndrome, tuberosis, chlorosis, and Rett syndrome, have been associated with increased risk of autism. Yes, these diseases are genetic related diseases, and if there is a certain degree of change found in the genetics, that can also lead to autistic child or autistic, man or woman. In adolescents also. And this was found by Torre Ubita in 2016. I'm sorry for the last name I called out. But Torre in 2016 found this was a really, really cracked on, because what we wanted to know was, how is this forming? So we've got certain evidence of fragile X syndrome, tuberculosis, sclerosis, and Rett syndrome. You can obviously look up in Google and find out about these, diseases. Google is a better way to give you those answers. But now that we've come to this point, what is more we need to understand at this point? So as you can see, MET signaling is important in neocortical and cerebral cellular development, immune system function, and gastrointestinal repair, all systems that have manifested signs of dysfunction in autism. One of the most important components that the most autistic children's parents complain, my child doesn't eat, or my child doesn't even pay attention when he eats. He's just disturbed. Why would the child be disturbed in autistic when they don't eat? That's because of the gastrointestinal problems. The systems are abnormal. It's dysfunction. Imagine what happens. They eat something and boom, bloating. They'll have problems like upset stomach, stomach in the pain, vomiting, then acid reflux. These things are pretty common. It's going to come. And also malnutrition is really high. Because they don't have the ability to eat, you have to force to eat. So I'm going to explain to you exactly what are we supposed to do in all of these things. Because what happens in an autistic child is their hands are constantly working. So if you tell them to eat, it's very difficult. They'll move their heads somewhere else, and they're not going to be interested in eating, and it's going to get really difficult for them to eat. So you got to make a lot of ways and a lot of things to, put them into that attention. Okay, eat now. But that doesn't happen, and it's very difficult. Yes, it's quite challenging. So that we've come to this point, what is that we need to understand from here on? That genetic evidence has revealed that the genes encoding synaptic proteins include cell adhesions molecules, scaffolding proteins, and neurotransmitter receptors may be involved in pathogenesis of autism. This was found by Forrest 2018 and Borgeron in 2005, excuse me for the name, and Kaizuka and Takumi in 2018. I've been following these guys, Kaizuka and Takumi. They've been researching on autism pretty much in deep. So I really like the way they are researching on these things. But what are we trying to understand? Like I said in the beginning, it's all about the genetics. Now, as the genetics are changing, then what happens to the inside function? Imagine that you get to know the child is autistic. Then you do all kinds of therapies and medications. Although medications are not there. They're not. There's no such medications. Excuse me. There's no such thing as medications for autism, but there are some few medications that the FDA approved and they're giving to the autistic child. But we're not going to get to that part because autism is something that requires more of detailed attention and understanding. So medications have still not proven much. But as we talk on the molecules and scaffolding proteins, we're looking at a different level of understanding here. Scaffolding proteins are proteins that simultaneously bind to or more other proteins and organize binding partners into a functional unit to enhance signaling efficiency and fidelity. Now, this is where the problem is, for God's sake. Scaffolding proteins. They're binding proteins, right? Now imagine that there is this dysfunction and they're binding proteins, and they're extensively increasing the part of that activity. How can you control autism then? It should be binding protein and learning and memorizing and being productive. Now that is a deficit. There's a huge deficit. Imagine, where does this binding is happening then? This binding is happening in terms of getting towards, disturbance, not eating much food, playing around, and not eating much, doing my own things, not paying attention. So it's binding, it's increasing those activities inside. If it didn't happen this, then it happened that. Imagine that there are two roads. This is A road and this is B road. And there's this longer connectivity down here, So it's connecting these two roads. So imagine that this road is stopped functioning. Only this road is working. But this road has a longer route. This was a shorter route. So the shorter route is stopped functioning. Now you got to go with the longer route. So that's where the challenge is. The part of the binding protein is increasing those activity that should not be increased in a normal child. And that is why it's called autistic. How challenging this is. If you give this to an autistic child, it might not be appropriate. Why? Because they don't know what to do with it. It's very dangerous because it's sharp and they can do anything with it. That is how dysfunctional autistic child is. And we have to understand its functionality from inside. And that's what I'm making you explain of scaffolding proteins. It's increasing its value, but decreasing that activity that we're not supposed to do. That we're supposed to do, they decrease that activity. Increasing unhealthy activities, which decrease the amount of productivity in an autistic child. And then what we need to do it manually. That's the challenging in autistic. So then what we need to understand is, as you can see, lower functional connectivity in cortical regions have been found in studies involving language, working memory, problem solving, and social cognition, providing evidence of a general problem with functional underconnectivity within and between neocortical systems in autism. This is CNS. I told you that how difficult it's going to get now. Neocortex is the largest brain of human, found in humans. Then comes the limbic system. Then comes the lizard brain. The mammalian brain, the lizard brain, and the neocortex. How deep and vast neocortex is. It's big. It's big. Neocortex. Then you go inside mammalian brain. Then you go inside lizard brain. So imagine this big is neocortex. Then this small is the mammalian brain. Then this small is the lizard brain. So its size gets smaller, but the functionality is bigger in neocortex. How intense and crazy the system is. What is happening to this section here? Social cognition finish. proper communication. Then comes involvement of language, working memory, problem solving. 3 things right here, finish. Connectivity, lose, and it's very difficult for the autistic child to pay attention and do work on this. It's very difficult. And that is where the challenge is, to open this up. Because the genetics are wrecked, this thing is also not functioning well. What are we supposed to do now? The only thing that we need to do is manually help the child to do certain tasks, manually, because automated system is wrecked now. So let's say if they want to, okay, every day they need to pick up this pen and write. They'll do that on one day, you do it, and they'll do it. Then the next day also you got to do that. Why? Because working memory is finished. The paying attention is gone. The working memory is causing problems. Then how the child is supposed to remember things? 15 minutes ago they did something and they forget about it. Then they go in and do it again. Why? Because the system is wrecked. The changes are found in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the volume in the temporal lobe, the occipital lobe. Finish. How the child is supposed to pay attention. Neocortex. It's a brain development. It just gives you that personality development. It gives you so many things. But that's not happening. And if these changes are happening, then what happens to the child? 99% autistic child goes through severe depression. And you don't even know that. Because it's so difficult to detect. Oh, why the child is upset. Maybe he has autism, which is why he's upset. There's no such thing as depression. He's always like that. Or she's always like that. No. Try to understand. Changing in PHT5, 5HT, levels in the brain during development periods have long-lasting effects on brain function. Example, on anxiety and depression later adulthood. Bonin and Levitt in 2011, Teaser in 2017. Look at what they said on anxiety and depression in adulthood. So if the serotonin keeps changing, then imagine what's going to happen. As they grow, depression, anxiety is on high. Imagine that there's a chemical that keeps you calm. If you knock off that chemical completely, how can you stay calm? How? Think about it. I'm giving you the reality of insights. Please understand this function. A knockoff chemical is not functioning. How can you stay calm? And then he keeps saying to the child, stay calm, stay calm, stay calm. Don't do this, don't do this. It's not going to work because it's not working. How can they stay calm? It just hurts from inside to see how the system is wrecked from inside. Poor judgment, poor understanding. And they freak out really fast. One word here and there. Trust me, the child will isolate, won't eat, and very much in depression, high. You don't treat it, it'll get worse, and the child will suffer from malnutrition. And then you gotta hospitalize the child for malnutrition as well. Keep a watch on what you say to your autistic child. What you do to your autistic child will change the system from inside. We should not increase the part of dopamine or lessen the capacity of dopamine inside an autistic child because there's a dysfunctions of neurochemicals inside. And one word here and there, you got to be extremely fragile. And if you're going to be fragile to them, let them, it's going to happen. If you understand as a parent that the system is wrecked, is going to happen, then you should be patient enough to understand they repeat mistakes. They'll repeat things that is going to irritate you, that's going to change your mood. So you need to understand this as a parent, that it's going to happen. The system is wrecked. You need to show some compassion and be a little bit, trying to give them that little bit of care and loving to keep them intact. System is wrecked. And it's challenging. So now that we've come to this point, what are the things that we need to understand? Autism is characterized by abnormalities in complex behaviors, language and cognition, with mental retardation in 70% of the cases, and seizures in 30%, and the absence of blindness, deafness, and long track signs in 90% to 95% of cases without any cause of brain dysfunction other than autism. If you see me now that I'm just, resting look at my position right now. What is this? This is what I'm talking about. Let's say you're blind. After a test, they found that yes, there is a problem in this section. If you do the operation, it's going to get all okay. You're dumb. The system that happened inside is wrecked. We understand why the child is dumb. A damage to the ears. They say, I know the eardrums are damaged. You cannot hear anymore. So what are we trying to understand? We know that there's something happened inside, which is why there's this disability. But if the brain is normal, then why would there be such a disability? Blindness. You cannot speak. Brain is normal. And still, imagine how flexible this CNS is. This is what I'm talking about. Please don't blame any researcher or scientist that why they can't find a cure. It is so complex that we're requesting people to have patience because we're still working hard on these terms. I'm giving you a full insight on autism so you guys can understand, if you can have a little bit of patience on us, that we're trying hard to find things. It's very difficult, trust me. If I were to show you certain tests on genetics on a molecular level, give me a minute. I've got a chart here. This was done by a scientist. Look at this crazy stuff. Look at this and look at this. This is the extension of this. And look what they've done here. They've expanded to show clear signs on a molecular level. This is how deep you're trying hard. For God's sake, try to understand how complex this is. How complex this is. We're trying hard. Please give us some appreciation on our side that we are putting a lot of effort. This is not normal. And to get to this point, it takes a lot of hard work, trust me. This is never easy. We're still trying to find many ways to treat autism. Now that we've coming back to these questions that we were talking about, and then I talked about serotonin, and plus that I talked about the deafness, the blindness, and plus the part of speech. Now these three are critical areas. If the functionality is working normal from inside, because the genes have knocked off the molecular level, it's not functioning well. The molecular levels are narrowing, and due to that, the normal presence it's like it's wide and it's having those gaps, but here it's narrowed, it's really small, and it's getting bigger, which means the complexity increases inside the brain. even though it's functionally normal. Now imagine that there are two pipes. One pipe, the water flows, it's really normal and it's easy. It's a thick and big pipe, and the water flow is really good. Imagine the same amount of pressure is applied to a really, really small pipe. A pipe smaller like this, really small pipe. Will it go through easily? Or some part will come out and some part won't? And that's the difficulty in the connectivity when those molecules have smaller gaps and they're all over the place inside the brain. There is no proper, distribution of the connectivity. It's all over the place. And that's how difficult autism is. The regulation of thick pipe is much more easier than the regulation of smaller pipe is much more difficult to pass through it. So the narrowing of these moleculars is making it very difficult in an autistic child. Then there is also another major problem, the decrease in corpus callosum size, independent of brain volume. Okay, so what does corpus callosum does? And why are we talking on corpus callosum? Corpus callosum is one of those part of the cerebral spinal fluid. And you would see that how these mechanisms, they start to change. Corpus callosum is one of those where probably that if I know that it also applies to the sections of language and deficits in comprehensive humor, theory of the mind, and social reasoning. So if there is decreased volume in corpus callosum, then what are we going to find? It goes like this, it just starts to shrink. Then how can you have a better cognition? Think about it. If one of my regions in the brain, just imagine like this, if this size decreases, then to hold this mic will be very difficult, isn't it? So there is a reason why that brain region is. If any change is found in certain brain regions, then dysfunction is going to happen outside, and that's what's happening. What are they saying here? Agenesis of corpus callosum is a congenital condition in which corpus callosum fails to develop. See, I told you such individuals exhibit localized deficits in non-lateral language comprehension, humor of theory of mind, and social reasoning. I would still request that how this is exhibiting from inside. Now you know, corpus callosum. Simple. Corpus callosum making it very difficult. You must have seen an autistic child. They're very bad language. Bad language means it's not proper functioning. Sometimes the child will not speak at all. They'll be too talkative. They don't know when to stop. Then the humor is wrecked. They'll have unusual humor and they might just laugh and smile on anything and everything because they think it's funny. No judgment, no judging anyone. But I'm trying to make you understand about the brain region. So that connectivity is less. It's not developed fully. So if it's not developed fully, then how can they have communication on this region? The region communicates but fails to communicate well. So then it hits back to the frontal cortex. So the frontal cortex will also have irregular synapses, which means they don't know how to communicate. So the communication between the regions are wrecked and it's all over the place. It's very difficult to treat an autistic child, isn't it? So now that we come to this section, we'll understand even deeper and more and vast of these sections. What are we most understanding from here on is children who have not developed language by age of 5 are more impaired on early measures of social communication, joint attention, and imitation skills. This was done by Trum in 2007. Sorry about my pronunciation about the last name. But children, the age of 5, from 2 to 5 years of age, I always say that keep and watch on your child, because there are signs that may come up. If the child is underdeveloped, then you'll get signs between these ages. You have to be extremely cautious between the age of 2 to age of 5, and from birth to age of 2 years is also sensitive because we have to take care of the child. But right after 2 years of age, right after the age of 2 years, you've got to open your eyes and ears and watch your child. Observe your child every day. Don't just leave them just like so. Observe your child behavior. Observe your child, what is it doing. Observe your child in terms of understanding. Observe your child in terms of learning and memorizing. Observe your child in their behavior, eating pattern. Observe all of it, head to toe. Heads up for the parents. When you have a child, from birth to 2 years, from 2 years to 5 years, is massive role of parents. Massive, huge. You have to learn how to take care of a child in these ages. You should never ignore any signs. If you want to seek help, go seek help of child specialists, seek help of child psychologists, seek help of psychiatric departments, seek help. And seek help means it'll give you more insights on whether the child is normal or is having some other problems. So when you seek help for the child, you would see that there is certain improvement that happens in autism children, but it takes time. It depends on the genetics development and how does the CNS is developing with time. So there is a serious cognition problems in autism, as much as we have learned that about attention and imitation skills. So we're looking at more on these functions. Then how about more on a deeper evaluation on gender specific as well? So gender is also one of the most important factors associated with heterogeneity in autism. Autism is approximately 3 to 4 times more prevalent in boys than girls. CDC 2007, this was reported. So when they did a research on these gender specific, it was quite obvious to find out that it was more in the boys and girls. But then why would there be more on the boys and girls? Which means most of the boys were easily prone to autism than girls, isn't it? The genetics are binding in such a way that it affects the guy, the boy more than the girl. I mean, that's what I started to understand about this. That this is more of towards the boys and girls. I mean, I don't want to get biased here, but this is more towards understanding the disease. That why boys are more affected than girls. And one of the most part of the investigation was the heterogeneity in boys are found more than the girls. And then because of this, then what else do we need to understand? So as you can see, the two areas of the brain that are important in retrieving self-knowledge are the medial prefrontal cortex and the medial posterior parietal cortex. The posterior cingulate cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, and the medial frontal cortex are thought to be combined with the ability to self-reflect. Why did I have to bring this up? Because in ASD, or the autism spectrum disorder, do they have any self-realization? No. This is that connectivity where I started to learn more on autism. The connectivity is wrecked, which means the front portion that is supposed to be the frontal lobe, the front section right here, the connectivity is sort of impaired, which means, like I said, the cells are there, but they're not doing anything. So what we need to do, we need to enhance it by manually doing this. Now, manual means someone else has to be the part of working memory. Just like, I cannot do it, but you do it for me, isn't it? So that person will become a manual working memory for my brain. This is what autism is. I cannot do it, but you force me to do it, which means manually you are shifting the concentration by your power. You're doing this for me. And that's the strength of, the manual or the forced mechanism that can be used in autism. However, it's really clear to understand that they won't have self-realization. Why? Because those sections do not have much capacity or to have more synapses or binding synapses that can help in ability to understand and learn new things, just like Hebbian synapses helps you in learning. Those synapses are pretty much essential for learning new things. Obviously, Hebbian synapses won't work well on autism because the system is imbalanced. So those synapses are pretty much not doing much well to the autism child. We need to do it manually to make things happen for them. And that's what challenge is. How can we understand their brain? I will come up with a video on autism, especially on working memory, learning and memorizing. That will give more insights on how to connect with an autistic brain. It's just going on more on this on a deeper level, but it makes a huge difference. Please try to understand. Imagine you have a normal brain, and a normal brain connects. It can understand up to a certain degree, but where there is an imbalance in the brain and a normal brain connects with an impaired brain, then it's very difficult to communicate. So how to communicate on those levels? Through the eyes of neuroscience. I'll make you understand in the future videos. I'm working on that project. I just want to make sure that I have enough information, precise information, to make you realize how can you connect with that brain. Forget about the outside. Just forget about the outside symptoms of the behavior. I'm talking in terms of how can we connect with that brain. The outside doesn't matter. The moment you connect with that brain, boom, finish. Just like you hack in a system and then it's in your hands. You can do whatever you want with that system, isn't it? So when you connect with that brain, at that point, they will follow you through whatever you say or whatever you do, because you're connecting with that brain. And that's the challenge, that the neuroscience wants to understand that part. So the self-realization is wrecked. Imagine that when you talk on autism and you say can you talk about yourself, what is the best interest you have, or what do you want to do, what do you want to become? it's very difficult for them to talk on these terms. When it comes to self-development, self-realization, self-improvement, it's all very difficult, which is why autism is very hard to treat. If this is happening from the outside, then what more that we need to understand the inside wrecked system. High-functioning adults with autism has relatively high levels of activation in the left posterior superior temporal gyrus, Wernicke, and left lower levels of activation in the left inferior gyrus, Broca, compared with the age and IQ match controls. The Wernicke's and Broca areas are very, very important for speech. Simple. I don't want to get into deep because it's going to be very difficult for you to understand. So speech, simply. 2 regions for speech. Does the autistic child have complaints that they cannot speak? It is true that system is wrecked. Either the child will speak a lot, either the child will speak not at all. And in adults, you would see that they have an imbalance. It is not in an ordered form. They still have struggles in speech. It's not like they cannot speak, but it's very difficult for them to manage to speak. Look at the main areas, the Wernicke's and Broca area. That's very difficult. If these systems are finding higher levels of activation, then it's very difficult to speak. You see, the activation is high. So there is no controlled speech. The speech will be wrecked. How can I make you understand this? Let's imagine that, you have a normal Toyota car, and then you have a high-speed hybrid car, like, McLaren, Mercedes, high speed. You have an experience of driving up to 150 kilometers or 200 kilometers max. Let's say you have an experience of 120 kilometers. That's it. But if you drive this car, then the minimum is 200. Are you able to control that car at the beginning? No, because it's really fast. It's very difficult to control it. Chances of meeting with an accident is really high. So that speed, that activation it's really high. So whatever the information goes, and it's quickly just getting processed, and it's very difficult to talk. You must have seen autistic, where a group of people sitting, and this autistic adult is sitting there, and he doesn't know what to speak. It's so difficult for them to speak up. They're losing their path. It's coming, it's processing, but they don't know how to speak. The process, it's very difficult to speak out. And that's what the autistic child is really, really having a hard time with. It's so fast that it's difficult to communicate. And it just gets worse. In a group of people, it's very difficult, but when they're sitting with one person, they can manage to speak a bit with a slower rate of speech. Not really high. But some of them have a really good pace. Some of them talk too much, but they don't have the pause. They just keep talking. Look what is happening here. These are one of those things. If this is what the problem is, then what are those things that we need to understand more on this? That while risperidone and aripiprazole remain the mainstays of ADHD treatment, they are FDA approved only for managing the irritability associated with the disorder. Now, risperidone is not approved by FDA administration for treating of behavior problems in older adults with dementia. Please note this. If you give them to the dementia patient, then please try to understand it's not going to be easy. You're about to worsen the symptoms of dementia, especially in adult. The behavior problems, these medications don't work well. So when it comes to maintaining autism, these two medications is given, but it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't do much. It's more of the functionality that's important. Rather than they'll give you some antidepressant, mood swing tablets and stuff like that, just to keep you intact. But there is no such medication for autism, only these two. And however, these two medications are limitations, and they come with side effects as well. So those side effects are pretty bad, and I don't want to talk on those terms. Which means if you're taking medications, please take care of yourself and don't take much on this. But these medications are the FDA approved, and there's no such medications to cure autism. Please try to understand. All we can do is have a manual guide for cognitive functions, like you can assist, they could be assisted by psychologist or psychiatric department. But there are also complex autism where it's very difficult to treat and they don't know what to do about it. What is that? What is that problem that is very difficult to treat in autism? What is that problem? Let us find out. So as you can see, the amygdala, a key node of the emotional perceptions attention system, is consistently smaller in volume and less activated during negative emotional processing, about higher levels of Alexithymia. This is that condition. What exactly this is all about? If you have this problem, not only psychiatric department but psychology department cannot treat. I'm talking about neuroscience. This is the finding from inside. What is this? Alexithymia. What is this? I'll explain you. You are talking to me. Number one. You're talking to me, and then you talk about your, my aunt died. Now, this autistic child does not know how to behave. They cannot process that emotion. It's coming in, but it's wrecked. They don't know what sad is, what love is, or what feeling of empathy or apathy. They don't understand any of this. So instead of going in, what is happening to the amygdala is that system is actually bypassing that stage. So the emotional processing is not happening. So they'll mask it. The left and right amygdala, they both are able to mask for autism. Thank God that expression is still there. So because of this, they're able to mask that emotion, and they say like, oh, I understand that, I'm sorry, that's it, finish. They don't understand anything. That part of that development of amygdala is gone. Limbic system, finish. Underdeveloped, lower activity, or low in size, finish. How are they going to process? That is one of the primary reasons where the autistic child gets really aggressive, because they have no control. I'm talking about the inside function. Alexithymia, you can see it online as well. But I had to look at it online, and I was just understanding an autistic adult to understand about dysfunction. And that is why I'm talking about this problem now. That alexithymia, they gave the name, but then I had to dive deep and understand where was the problem. And my favorite region is amygdala, and always look on those regions, and I try to understand that function. It is a very smart and small region, but it's very important. Look, what is it doing? Imagine, it's so horrifying. Somebody says, I love you. An autistic child does not know how to do it. They might say, I love you, but they don't feel anything. I'm just giving an example. There are so many things. Feeling happy, sad. Yes, extreme emotions like depression, or when they're alone and they feel depressed. Strong emotions, they feel it. But when it comes to these happy feelings or connectivity and understanding emotions of others, it bypasses and they don't understand. That is alexithymia. The amygdala is finished. It cannot do anything. So underdevelopment and having smaller signs and stuff, that makes it very difficult for alexithymia. Now, alexithymia facets difficulty identifying feelings, study describing feelings, and external oriented thinking. This is really, this is what I wanted to talk about. If this is that major problem that we are looking into, look what is happening, identifying feelings. Do they identify feelings? No. Why? Because bypass. And my goodness, it's bypassing from one region. Then it's not processing. If it's not processing, then how can they understand someone's feeling? Isn't it sad? Yes. So what we need to do, we need to manually activate that region. And we have to do this every day. I'll explain you in this video how can you do all of this. So manually you have to do this. And that's where the challenge is. If you manually cannot do this, then it'll be wrecked. Forever, they'll never understand. Which is why social communication is difficult. How they'll analyze someone's emotions? How to talk to the other person when they cannot understand the other person's emotions and stuff. So difficult. Please, be patient with them. We have to show compassion. Compassion means don't always ask them about autism. Always be gentle to them. Don't make them feel guilty about autism. No. You have to have patience. And parents also need to understand that they need to de-stress themselves every day if they want to have a better cognition and a better understanding towards their child. And it's a very, very good thing to understand is that the parents need that me time to release that stress out. It's very difficult. Please, I'm with you. I'm with all the parents who are fighting with autism children. Like, they're trying to balance the autistic child. I'm with them. All we have to do is manually help them every day. If today they have done it, then tomorrow you have to repeat it again. That's all you need to remember. If you can do this every day, then they'll come into alignment. You continue to do that. Then comes the part of Kugel and colleagues found that specifically the Alexithymia facet DIF was negatively correlated with the neural response of the right amygdala to mass sad faces, even when controlling for depressivity and anxiety, and negatively correlated with activation of left amygdala in response to masked sad but not happy faces, controlling for traits, anxiety, and depression. I told you the left and right amygdala controlling the phases. At least they have something to hide. I know it's very difficult for them to speak up, but God has given them something, is to mask it. At least they can do that, to have, talk to the other person. Although in the future, we might have signs to improve that condition through genetic medications that can improve the condition of an autistic child. So now that we've come to this point, but also I need to make a reminder about that the left and right amygdala, they do not have a clear communication, so it's pretty much difficult for them to express their emotions, which means the left and the right hemisphere is also wrecked. The left and the right hemisphere, and then the central circus. So left and right hemisphere, they don't do good. That's the sad part. The communication is wrecked. And that is why the problem of connectivity is even more difficult. But how can we treat genetically to improve all of this? Because one by one, all of these brain regions to treat is very difficult in neuroscience. We need to dive deep into one part is genetics and the CNS. And if we can do that in early stages, like if the baby is born and you say like about 3 to 4 years of age, the child is diagnosed with autism, then with the help of medications we can treat, or we can improve the genetics with those medications. How cool would that be? You see, this is not imagination. This is all about diving deep and understanding those traits. And that's where the strength is, that we have something to prove and something that we need to more dive deep and gain more clarity, that we can build a stronger communication between the CNS and the brain development. And if we can do this with the help of medications, then what more we can ask for? And medications means, I don't want to go deep into this because I'm researching deep into this, and I don't want to talk more on this because unless I don't have any more on this, like I cannot just say, just because I have something to say, no. I should have evidence, right? Evidence to prove that this is how it works to heal genetics. So unless I don't have the evidence, how can I treat an autism child? So I need to do a lot of understanding and studies towards these regions and get more answers so I can give more my contribution towards autism. So let's just go deeper into this. As you can see, sensory overload occurs because the brain has received too much information. This is a part of the brain called the amygdala, which is responsible for directing information to where it needs to go. The amygdala is a bit like an air traffic controller. However, instead of directing planes, it directs sensations. Now this is what I want to make you explain. What do I need to make you understand about sensory overload? This is going to be a really eye-opening. Let's say you have a lot of information and then you give to an autistic child. That information burdens up inside. It's too much for the brain to process, and wrecked, they go straight into sensory overload. They don't know how to process it. It's too complex. And then it's gone, finish. And then they start, I don't want to get into the symptoms of sensory overload. You know what it is. But I'm talking about the inside function. So when it hits direct, what do we mean by it directs sensations? Why? Imagine that you're driving a car. And you've been driving a car for 25 years. Just give an example. And And when you're driving a car, in 25 years, nothing happened. For the first time, you pass. What do? You pass the signal for the first time. You forget there was a signal. You're talking over the phone and you pass. And boom, the cops are standing there. They saw you. And now you're freaking out. What the hell did I do? What am I doing? And boom, you go. You want to escape. You literally want to escape. You want to face them. And so you escape. You really escape from that place. What is happening here? A, the information that went in, you're supposed to have a realization. Number two, instead of understanding it, the caudate nucleus, automated system, fly, finish, escape. What happened? Automated system gone. It directly hit the part of flight and flight response and you're gone. So what happens in overload sensory is the amygdala is directing directly to the senses, not processing it. Now senses are wrecked. If heavy information goes directly to the senses, sensations, then the sensations are going to go wild. The child is going to shout, cry, do whatever it wants. But it's going wild inside the brain. And that's where the problem is, directly hitting. Directly. No processing. So imagine what happens to senses. Finish. You know what happens in sensory motor functions? That happens and sensory overload occurs when the brain struggles to interpret, prioritize, or otherwise process sensory inputs. It then communicates to the body that it is time to escape these sensory inputs. This message causes feeling of discomfort and panic. Like I told you about this, what is happening inside, isn't it? Now look what is happening the outside. Information struggles to interpret, prioritize, or otherwise process sensory inputs. It means it communicates to the body that it is time to escape these sensory inputs. I give an example. You sit in the car and for the first time you've passed that signal and now you've gone crazy. Why did I do this? I go, oh my goodness. And you say, isn't it? You do that. You do that. Or if you look at the screen and you do that and you want to escape, that's it. How did I do this? And you start to beat up. Because the information is directly heading towards fight and flight response. That information is too much. You cannot process it. And you escape. Isn't it? So that processing of autism is gone. So it's directly the communication to the sensory inputs, like to the body, it's too much, escape. And like, finish. Where would they escape? So that overstimulation comes out from their body and they escape. So processing is lessened. The lesser that processing and the more frequently they're going to be out doing in numbers on sensory overload. Number of times they'll keep doing it. And we keep inputting those information over and over again. We don't need to do that. We need to understand that it's all about amygdala. And amygdala is a region that I research a lot. And I want to make sure that you get the right information on these conditions. But now that we've come to this point, we've come to the last sections of autistic. And what we need to understand from here on, let us try and understand. So as you can see, like I said, autistic children talk too much with no pause. That's because of, if you see at the last there, sensory over responsivity, SOR. which means they keep stimulating it and they keep talking. And they don't know when to stop. And that's very difficult in autistic children. So there is no pause in the end. And there is very difficult to process. Like they don't know how to pause. Then comes the part of autistic children have no speech at all. No speech at all because there is no connectivity in the brain regions. Like connectivity between the Wernicke's and Broca's area is wrecked. They don't know how to communicate. The speech is dull. There is no speech at all, and it's very difficult to talk. Then comes frequent analyzing on other emotions. We need to analyze on other emotions, especially on autistic child, if they are having difficulties in eating, sitting down, talking to others. And if they're sitting silent, then please analyze on terms of depression. It's very high in children's and autistic children's. So analyzing emotions, especially when they're feeling sad, happiness also, how much they're being happy, and either they're being too happy or they're not being happy at all. Then comes abnormal somatic sensations. Like I said, we talk on sensory overload. That's a part of abnormal somatic sensations, where they don't understand how to take all of that information, and abnormal somatic sensations are built inside, and they try to get it, and they get it overexcited, overstimulation, and they want to escape the situation as well. Then comes cytoarchitectonic changes in limbic circuitry. Psychoarchitectonic changes in the limbic circuitry is the changes found in the cells, the cell size, the cell volumes. They all are changed. So when there's a change in that limbic circuitry, I can guarantee you this, that you're going to find is the Alexithymia in autistic child, where they cannot process information. It's very difficult for them to process certain information. Alexithymia is due to the cytoarchitectonic changes in the limbic system. So vast changes of the cells, then how can the connectivity be strong? The connection will be like changing. Imagine like you have wiring in the home. I give examples like this a lot. You have wiring in your living room, you have the same wiring in your bedroom, but light fluctuates in your bedroom, not in the living room. Why? Because the connection is wrecked. You need to change the wiring, isn't it? In a similar fashion, wiring in the brain, especially the connectivity in the limbic system, is wrecked, which is why they cannot process those information, especially in terms of emotions or understanding other people's emotions. It clearly shows that they cannot do it. Alexithymia is one of those regions where the limbic system or the amygdala is wrecked and the connection is not doing well. I will talk on limbic system with autism in the future videos, that how can we improve the limbic system as well. Yeah, there's so many things to talk on autism, but let us try and understand more on other sections as well. In terms of, excuse me. In terms of understanding these systems that we've talked on, sensory inputs, the part of alexithymia. Then I talked about sensory over-responsivity, which is SOR. We've seen in part of somatic sensory that somatic sensory is what I believe that needs to be improved. Why do I believe? Because I dive deep into their senses and the sensory systems to understand. And what I found was the somatic sensory, we can tune into of their sensory, somatic sensory, the sensations. The major part of somatic sensory is the hands. stronger receptors are in the hands. So I'm going to make you understand in the next slide or the coming slide about this as well. So let us try and understand about the part of diet first. What are we supposed to do? Although they are not clear with the diet, but I have something to make you understand that might help. Please try to understand. So as you can see, avoid tea and coffee. That's very bad for the part of autism. Tea and coffee is more like an overstimulation. It doesn't improve any focus or nothing. Because why? Because autistic child has gastrointestinal problems. So tea and coffee is bad for them. Number one, avoid high-fat meals to reduce the part of acid reflux. Because it is wrecked, acid reflux is really high in autism. So you should try to control with high-fat meals. You can improve the condition by fish oil or fresh salmon. Introduce them like baked salmon or, curry-based salmon. You can also introduce coconut oil in food, which is also good for the brain. Coconut oil is really good. You can also involve in that as well. Cold pressed coconut oil. You can make food. But you got to keep a watch on it that the stomach doesn't get upset. So please keep a track on healthy fats. Fresh salmon, make it light, make it easier for the stomach that they can digest. Then comes a part of probiotic, range from 1.4 to 4 billion bacterial colonies. I recommend, because it's about esophageal acid reflux, GERD, constipation and all of this that happens. We want the stools to be forming pretty well. So probiotics really help for autistic child. Now you got to go in the market and find between 1.4 to 4 billion bacterial colonies. But please do not take, the probiotic drink that you get in the market. That's pretty bad. Find something reasonable that's good for the gut. Don't buy high sugary probiotic drinks. That's very bad for the children's. Don't do that. So probiotics will help to form proper stools, and constipation will also be lessened in children's, or even diarrhea will stop with children's. Stomach upset, diarrhea. Then comes the part of quinoa. Quinoa is really good, better than rice, and gluten, which is bread and wheat. So if you have quinoa in their diet, mixing with vegetable, quinoa salad or quinoa with curries and vegetables, quinoa with salmon, it's a very good replacement for rice and whole wheat breads. Quinoa is not only gluten-free, but it's high in protein. It is also good for your stomach as well. It digests pretty well, and I highly recommend for autistic children. And then comes a part of my understanding is the Ayurvedic medications, which is Brahmi, Ashwagandha, and Shankapushpi. You can do a research on this. You can experiment with the child. It's a very good, effective Ayurvedic. It not only these three improves focus, but also will improve the part of, attention as well. So, Brahmi, Ashwagandha, and Shankapushpi, these three, please look up for it if you can find something good. I don't have any recommendations because I didn't had any, much information on what product is good. But if I get in the future, I'll definitely suggest you some good products on Brahmi, Ashwagandha, and Shankapushpi. If I get something, I'll definitely post it. And even if I have something that I can find on a specific products, I'll definitely post that as well. But on fish oils, cod liver oil, please take that. Brahmi, ashwagandha, and shankapushpi. They are lesser side effects, but they're good for the brain and for the body health, overall health. So you can try these part of these Ayurvedic medications, and please less the intake of sugar intake. It's very bad for an autistic child. And once you stop that, lessen the power of sugar, then you would see that the child will eat well and malnutrition will be less because they are really, really low in appetite. The child craves for sugar. Don't do that. Avoid sugar for them, and please give them food, nutrition, proper diet. Follow the diet pretty well. Avoid too much of rice and part of the wheat. Don't do any of those. And then we understand is the most common GI symptoms include chronic diarrhea, abnormal distension, discomfort and bloating, gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, excessive gas, constipation, fecal impaction, food regurgitation, and a leak gut syndrome. Children with autism are also at risk for many other nutritional problems such as nutrition deficiency, food allergies, food intolerance, and feeding problems. And then we also need to understand is the gluten-free, casein-free. It includes gluten, the protein in wheat, and casein, the protein in milk. So please understand the gluten-free and casein-free needs to be avoided in autistic children, especially the wheat and casein milk. There are casein-free milk available in the market. You can give them to the child and it'll be like, comforting. I'm not sure how many child will benefit by this, but whomsoever is benefiting, continue to take all of these. But if you're not benefiting, then you got to experiment with different products. I know, but there's nothing we can do. But if you experiment, but I would recommend is Brahmi, ashwagandha, and shankapushpi. Try these Ayurvedic medications. Try. See what happens. Follow the instructions and give to the child. Lesser part of, side effects, but more towards understanding the disease. It improves overall health as well. It can also improve your part of your digestive system as well. So do it. It's very good. So now that we've come to the end stage of all of this, what are we supposed to understand? And what are we supposed to do for autistic child to improve their condition? So as you can see, sandalwood, rose, and lavender oil massage is good for autistic child. Why is it good? Because these oils will help to improve their condition, the ability to improve the condition of their eyesight, to improve the condition of their motor functions, to lessen the power of their rigidity. Imagine that the autistic child, they use their hands a lot, they don't stay stable. Plus their senses will start to improve, which means lessen the power of sensory overload in them. If you do everyday massage, oil, especially of sandalwood, rose, and lavender, you would see a lot of improvement in them. But this will take time because it's a manual exercise. Then comes sign language, when to pause. We need to teach them sign language, especially in terms of when the child speaks too much and they don't know how to talk. They don't know when to pause. So imagine like you move your hands like, if I do this, you need to pause. If I do this, you need to pause. So you need to teach them sign language, when to pause, especially when they're doing certain things. Then talk in only with their interest. This is very interesting. When we're talking in terms of amygdala, which is lower in volume, we need to talk in their interest to improve amygdala conditions. Talking in interest, which means to improve the condition of amygdala, the processing. So talk only in their interest, and that will improve amygdala condition. That's the best way to improve amygdala, which means slowly they start to have realization about themselves as well. Practice sensations, hot and cold therapy. Practice sensation means hot and cold therapy. You have 2 buckets, hot and cold water. Ask the child to play with the toy in that water. Let them play in that water hot for 1 minute, and then take that toy and put in the cold water and let them play in that cold water. Now what are we doing here? As they start to play, they will start to recognize the hot and cold water. This is that therapy that will help to improve the somatic sensory. Now what we need to do is initially have mild lukewarm water and cold water, not really cold, but normal cold water. Why? Because there are chances of the child to be overstimulated, or they can get to the point of sensory overload. So what we need to do is we need to give them cold and hot water, let them put their hand and then play with the toy. 1 minute up, take that toy and put in the cold water. Now as they start to recognize that, then you improve the quality of that water, which means earlier it was lukewarm water, now it's a medium hot. Then after some time you see it's recognizing it, then you improve it to the hot water. Then they'll have a little bit of disturbance while putting the hand in there because it's hot. But they'll recognize it. That is what the process is all about. Recognizing the state of the somatic sensations. And as they improve it, then you improve it with the taste, with the smell, with the sound. The recognize should be improved. Practice sensations. That's where you begin with. Then comes calming activity. To improve the part of staying calm in one place, we need to improve their condition by painting, by, playing with words. Something that they require sit and they do activities. Calming activities. Sitting in one place and doing it. If they're able to do that, then everything is sorted. This should be done every day. That's the saddest part. That we cannot just do it for one day. We have to do all of this every day to improve their condition because it's manual. I've already talked about this. It's a manual system. So once that you understand these sections, and that's it. There's all you need to do for autism for now. Yes, if you have any questions, you can mail us to Precious Brain Lab. We'll try and reply you and give you as many answers to your question as we can in our best ability. So, apart from this, please subscribe my channel. It's a non-profit organization. We have nothing to do with in the future videos, we're going to come up with a lot of videos like this. Of course, we don't have much information now, but yes, please believe in us. We're going to come up with more insights on these sections, and hoping that you subscribe our channel, and we'll do a lot on the larger scales. Be a part of this community of Precious Brain Lab. We're requesting you to please subscribe to the channel. So your mental health is important to your family. God bless you all. Sending you so very much love, light, and healing. Stay happy and stay blessed. I will see you on a new video. God bless you all.